Hello, hello, hello. How's it going, guys? Oh, it's a thrill to be here with you guys. So my name is Jason Silva, and I am the host of Brain Games on the National Geographic Channel, which often looks at our perceptions and misperceptions of the world. And I think that there's a lot of misperceptions when it comes to technology and disruption. So I'm extremely passionate about human creativity. I'm extremely passionate about human imagination. And this has turned into a passion for technology and innovation because I believe that ultimately technology is the embodiment of human creativity in the world. Technology is the literalization of human imagination in the world. Technology is the human mind turned inside out. Technology is how we impregnate the world with mind and creativity. In fact, the cognitive philosophers David Chalmers and Andy Clark describe technology as a kind of scaffolding of our minds that extends our thoughts, our reach, and our vision. And it has always been so. 100,000 years ago, in the savannas of Africa, when early hominids first picked up a stick on the ground and used that stick to reach a fruit on a really high tree, we've been using our sticks, our tools, our instruments to extend our limits, to transcend our boundaries, to redefine our limitations. And in turn, our tools and technologies have transformed us. As the philosopher Marshall McLuhan used to say, we build the tools, and then those tools build us. Now today, it's safe to say we live in the age of radical disruption. We live in the age of transformation. We live in the age in which it feels like the rug is being pulled from underneath our feet. Everything is changing so fast. Everything is being upended. Everything is being called into question. It's overwhelming. It's really exciting, but it can also be terrifying, right? We're feeling these disruptions in real time. But the truth is, these disruptions have always occurred throughout our history. It's just that they used to accrue over many generations. The world didn't really change very much within one's own lifetime back in the day. The changes accrued over many lifetimes. But today, the changes are happening in real time. The changes can be felt within our own careers. Our own jobs change in weeks, in months. It's happening now. And the question is, why? Why is it speeding up? Why do we feel it now? If this has always been the case, if technology has always disrupted humanity, why does it feel so overwhelming lately? And this has to do with the exponential nature of technological progress. I don't have to tell you guys about Moore's Law. You've probably heard the term used a million times, right? The nature of technological change is exponential. But you see, the problem is that the human brain evolved in a world that was linear and that was local. So our intuition about change is linear. Our instinct about change is linear. We can be educated. We can be told 1,000 times. They can beat it over our heads. Technology changes exponentially. You have to understand the implications of Moore's Law so you can plan exponentially for these transformations. Again, our intuition continues to be linear. It's just not our wiring. We're future blind because we have this linear lens. We see with this lens, we see through our lens, but we don't see the lens themselves. So we don't realize that we're continuing to think linearly in the age of exponentials. So here's a very, very quick example used by the famed futurist Ray Kurzweil, who runs engineering at Google at the moment. And he's a famous futurist. He's basically Mr. Singularity himself. And the example that illustrated, at least for me in a way that I never forgot, the difference between linear change and exponential change is his famous 30 steps example. Really easy. If you take 30 linear steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. By step 30, where are you? You're at 30. 30 linear steps, 30 changes over time, right? 30 steps gets you to 30. But if you take the same amount of steps exponentially, 2, 4, 16, by step 30, you're actually at 1 billion. So this is where it gets interesting. 30 linear steps gets you to 30. 30 exponential steps gets you to a billion. And technology advances in these exponential steps. That's the reason the smartphone in your pocket today is 1,000,000 times cheaper, 1,000,000 times smaller, yet 1,000 times more powerful than what used to be a $60 million supercomputer that was half a building in size 40 years ago. What used to be half a building now fits in your pocket. That's exponential progress. This is 1,000 times more powerful and 1,000,000 times cheaper and 1,000,000 times smaller than what used to be $60 million and occupy half a building 40 years ago. And those exponential trends, they're not stopping. So in the next 25 years, this will likely dematerialize into a blood cell-sized device interacting with our bodies and brains and continuing to reverse engineer us from inside out. This is where we're heading. But we're halfway there. The tools to change the world are now in everybody's hands. The supercomputers of yesterday are now in everybody's hands. A young kid in rural Africa with a smartphone has better communications technology than a head of state, than a president had 25 years ago. How does this change what becomes possible? How does this change what we become capable of? Stephen Johnson, in his marvelous book, Where Good Ideas Come From, A Natural History of Innovation, talks about the adjacent possible. The adjacent possible is a way of seeing things. It's a lens through which to see the world. The adjacent possible is a shadow from the future that hovers over the present and provides a map of all the ways in which the present can reinvent itself. The adjacent possible is a way of looking upon the world and imagining what might be, thinking exponentially, right? Once the mind is stretched by a new idea, it never returns to its original position. We must remember that. We're like Dorothy, and we're about to go to Oz. We are stretching our cognitive Kansas so that we can see things exponentially, because exponentially, everything becomes possible. And even when it's scary, everything good and great begins at the edge of our comfort zone, at the edge of next, as this event is titled. We are on the cusp of a transformation of the human enterprise that we can barely even begin to fathom. As Eric Davis wrote, when everything becomes linked with everything else, matter becomes mind. As we impregnate the world with sensors, as we plug AI into everything, the same way we electrified the planet, now we cognitize the planet, as Kevin Kelly has written in Wired magazine. How does this change our scope of possibilities? How does this change the game? We are a hybrid of biological and non-biological intelligence. We are distributing our cognition and our intelligence. We are creating a hive mind. We are cloaking the planet in a fabric of AI that will change the game. And my goal is to inspire you to embrace these disruptions, to embrace exponential change as exponential opportunity, right? To transcend the been-theres and done-thats of the adult mind and see the world as if through the eyes of a child. Everything is possible. Everything is possible. But at the end of the day, technology is a double-edged sword. Technology extends our capability in both positive and or negative ways. It's up to us. So the story we tell ourselves about ourselves matters because it determines our actions in the world. And this is the inspiration behind my work. I'm a digital storyteller in addition to my work on brain games. And I want to start actually by showing you a video, an anthem on the human capacity to overcome our boundaries, to hopefully electrify you with a sense of optimism, Please play the first video. To be human is to be transhuman.
So there's a great line by Shakespeare in which he says, "We know what we are, we know not what we may be." And in the age of accelerating technologies in which we extend the cognitive reach of our minds, the perimeters of our humanness with these extensions of self, these exoskeletons, these technological scaffoldings, the wings of our aircrafts and the signals traveling through our smartphones, sending our thoughts electrified at the speed of light across oceans of sky. We redefine and extend what it means to be human. Edward O. Wilson says, we have actually decommissioned natural selection, and now we must look deep within ourselves and decide what we wish to become. We are now the chief agents of evolution. We have reversed engineered the software of biology and are about to rewire and upgrade and redefine what it is to be a Homo sapien. Juan Enriquez uses the term Homo evolutus, the being that evolves itself, that transforms itself, right? Ray Kurzweil, we didn't stay in the caves. We haven't stayed on the planet. Biology, just another membrane to be transcended. Marvin Minsky used to say, will robots inherit the earth? Yes, they will, but they will be our children. I love this idea because we hear the term transhumanism, and what it means to be human is to be transhuman. We are the species that transforms and transcends. We never stopped. We always did. It's what we are.
I have an abiding belief in the human capacity to overcome our boundaries, and I'm incredibly excited, as I've tried to convey, about exponential change, because I believe, again, that exponential change means exponential opportunity. Now, we've all seen these exponential transformations affect the world of digital technology. We've seen information technology cloak the planet in transformation. And I travel around the world and I get to talk to audiences about embracing exponential change. And often people will tell me, you know what? I buy that because I've seen it. There's evidence for it. The trends are clear with information technology. But what about the world of flesh and concrete, right? The sort of world that we dwell, the physical world in which we dwell. Certainly that is not subject to exponential change, right? Well, it turns out that the world of flesh and concrete is now also becoming an information technology and thus also subject to these exponential trends. For example, biology. So now we're entering the age of biotechnology. Biotechnology means mastering the information processes of biology. Because it turns out that we are alphabetic all the way down. DNA is code. Our DNA is our little software programs. We are alphabetic beings all the way down. And we are increasingly harnessing the capacity to turn biology into a programmable medium. The physicist Freeman Dyson has talked about a very near future where a new generation of artists will be writing genomes with the fluency that Blake and Byron and Shakespeare wrote verses. What's going to happen when our artists and engineers get to use biology as their canvas, get to use biology as their paintbrush? What are we going to make? How will we self-modify? How will this change medicine? And it turns out that advances in biotechnology are moving along at the predictably exponential rates. Gene sequencing is advancing 3 times faster than Moore's law. It's going 3 times faster than exponential. We're already seeing it. The X Prize Foundation recently had a contest for the first medical tricorder that a group of technologists could create. Smartphone-sized device that could diagnose you better than 10 board-certified doctors. Lab-on-a-chip technologies, they call them. Google's Larry Page co-founded Calico, the California Life Extension Company, a software company for biology. They get this in Silicon Valley. They got a Time magazine cover story called Google and the End of Death. See, it's not just about reprogramming our genes away from disease. It's not even about getting rid of cancer. the same way we might rid our computer of a software virus, but increasingly longevity, increasing our health span, increasing our vitality, boosting our cognitive capacities. Who knows? When Craig Venter, the creator of the first synthetic organism, was asked, "Do you worry that you're playing God?" His response, which I think was brilliant, was, "Who's playing?" I'm telling you, very exciting, potentially game-changing for Homo sapiens. But all technologies are double-edged swords. So, of course, there are a host of concerns. DIY synthetic biology means that the crazy kid can create a pathogen in his garage. So, definitely something to be concerned of also. But I believe it's going to change the game. Then you have nanotechnology. The seminal book on nanotechnology by Eric Drexler was called Engines of Creation. And that's literally what nanotechnology implies. Nanotechnology will allow us to pattern atoms, right, at the level of the atoms, pattern and program atoms, the same way we pattern ones and zeros in digital technology. And you've seen what we can do by moving around ones and zeros in digital tech. With nanotech, the physical world becomes a programmable medium. We'll have software that writes its own hardware. We'll have buildings that assemble themselves, computers that build better computers. And by the way, nanotech exists in nature. You plant a seed in the soil, and it turns into a tree. That seed is an information file. It instructs the matter around it to turn into a tree. Nanotech is there. And again, advances in nanotechnology, you've probably heard of the term nanobots, little nano-sized devices in our bodies and brains repairing us at the molecular level. This is also coming. And of course, AI, right? Artificial intelligence, non-biological intelligence, advancing exponentially, scaring most people for the idea of the Terminator scenario where the AI is rising up against us. I happen to think, like Kurzweil and other optimists, that will merge with our AI. These will be narrow intelligences that specialize in certain things and will become a hybrid, as I've mentioned before. The human mind, according to the cognitive philosophers David Chalmers and Andy Clark, emerges in the feedback loops between brains, tools, and environments. We are mediated by our environments. Our environments already shape our thoughts. We interact with non-biological tools, and these tools change how we think. So, the Vitruvian man, if drawn today, would have probably a smartphone in his hand, and that would be an appendage. That would be a part of his physiology. We need to get over our skin bag bias and realize that we've exceeded our skin, that technology is our second skin, that technology is our exoskeleton, that technology is the mirror that reflects us back to ourselves. And these three overlapping revolutions, right? Biotech, nanotech, and AI together are leading us towards an event horizon, some say. It's kind of like staring into the sun. You know, you can't quite see because it's so bright. Just kind of like other singularities that happened in the past, like the emergence of language. You know, when we were early primates, we were really bright, like the chimpanzee. But try to explain to a chimpanzee the nuances of a Shakespearean sonnet. He just lacks the wetware, no matter how clever it is, to think about the rich symbolic world that language has opened up for us. Us, we're the chimps now. And on the back of these revolutions, AI, biotech, nanotech, we will transform ourselves into something else. You probably heard of Yuval Harari's bestseller, Homo Deus, which is the sequel to Sapiens, where he maps how these technologies will change the world, or Ray Kurzweil's The Singularity is Near, when humans transcend biology. Or as some call in Silicon Valley, refer to this moment as the rapture of the nerds. Because there's almost like a religious quality to it, like here we go. Except this is based on data-driven extrapolation. So it's not just blind abiding belief, it's, hey, look how far we've come. Look how fast we've gotten here. The math works. Where we're gonna be in 25 years when thinking exponentially, whoa. And this next video paints a picture, because I believe that As Marshall McLuhan said, it's always been the artist who realizes that the future is the present and uses his work to prepare the grounds for it. Please show the future of us.
So let's talk about the future of us. What does that even mean? The future of us. It's a look at what comes next. It's a look at what might be. Because today, exponentially emerging technologies are transforming what's possible. They are helping us overcome, transcend even biological limitations. The very rules of what it is to be human are up for grabs. We're rewriting the software of life with biotechnology. We're turning matter into a programmable medium with nanotechnology. We're creating sentient minds with artificial intelligence that are not bound by the limitations of biology. These three overlapping revolutions, GNR, genetics, nanotechnology, and robotics, together will be leveraged to lead us towards a black hole-like, impossible to fathom singularity. It's like staring into the sun, a moment of a rousing symphonic climax when all of mind, leveraged and networked together, transcends its biological origins, and we become something more. People worry about the AIs and the them. Well, as Kurzweil says, that's going to be us. The future of us is ours to dream up.
Now, the world is changing very fast. I mean, that much is obvious. You know, I sound like a broken record here, but it's what's happening. And so the question then becomes, what's going on here? What do we do? Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Should we be scared? Should we be excited? Now, I am of the opinion that this is an inevitability. I am of the opinion that this is an emergent property of the cosmos. The same self-organizing principles that turned single-celled organisms into multicellular organisms that eventually led to us seems to have been now birthed out of us in the form of technology. I mean, I think there's no better way to explain simultaneous inventions throughout history. Every great innovation, every great person that ever came up with a transformative original idea, there was always like 4 or 5 other people around the world that were on the cusp of discovering the same thing. I mean, it's kind of wild when you think about it. And Kevin Kelly, who started Wired magazine, and he's kind of a techno prophet himself, beautifully articulate writer, he refers to technology, as he calls it, the 7th kingdom of life. He calls it something that is subject to the same evolutionary forces as biological evolution. The name, the technium. It's such a wild idea. Technology as an organism. Technology as something that is literally alive. Right? We are the sex organs of technology. Technology uses us to perpetuate itself in this symbiotic, self-reinforcing feedback loop that is, again, accelerating. So if this is a natural thing, right, what is the attitude we should take? Rather than fear it, we should just realize that we're just along for the ride. And as Kevin Kelly has also echoed, imagine how impoverished human culture would be if we didn't invent the technology of the oil painting in time for Vincent van Gogh and his masterful work, or the technology of the musical instrument in time for Beethoven and Mozart. These were all technologies. Even our neocortex is a technology, late in the game of human evolution. Without it, we wouldn't have our imagination, probably. We wouldn't be able to conceive of things that don't yet exist, right? The technology of language in time for Shakespeare. What new forms of human creativity, beauty, and radiant glory will be made possible on the back of new technologies we cannot even begin to imagine? Just to see what we're going to make, we should be enthusiastic participants in engendering the tools and technologies that will change the world and are changing the world. We might as well be active participants rather than passive observers. We are the captains of this spaceship Earth, right? There's no passengers, just crew. And this next video that I want to show you goes even deeper into this subject of tech and nature, right? We're smack in the middle between the born and the made. It's all on a continuum. Because we're finding increasingly, actually, that the more sophisticated and advanced our algorithms, our systems, our man-made, our techno systems become, the more they start to actually mirror systems in nature. So then it starts to sound like the Twilight Zone. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Like the more artful and sublime our engineering and our designs, the more it starts to mirror systems found in nature. Like the way the TCP/IP protocols that govern information flow of traffic on the internet are organized like the neurons in our brain. What the hell is that? Please show the patterns video.
You know, there's a mind-expanding idea that smashes the false duality between nature and technology. The realization that nature and technology are one and the same, a continuum, smack in the middle between the born and the made, is summed up in the lines, to understand is to perceive patterns. That moment when the dots connect, you see the gestalt, long view, and you see the big picture. This notion of patterns. For example, Paul Stamets has written about the mycelial archetype and how the information sharing systems that comprise the internet, a man-made system, mirror the neurons in our brain, a natural system, which in turn mirror computer models of dark matter in the universe. They all share the exact same intermingled filamental structure. It's unbelievable. Or for example, the fact that forager ants, when they hunt for food, their patterns of hunting mirror the TCP/IP protocols that govern information flow of traffic on the internet. Same patterns. Jeffrey West from the Santa Fe Institute tells us that cities are actually like organisms. They have metabolic rates, and that alleys are like capillaries. Fly an airplane, look at a city from the sky. It looks like a motherboard. It looks like a microchip. Information arranged, evolution, life, sentience, mind. To understand is to perceive these patterns. There is no duality between nature and technology. It is all one and the same.
So obviously it's really fun to marvel. It's really fun to geek out. It's really fun to dive into the rabbit hole, right? I mean, we are Alice and we are in Wonderland. But at the end of the day, why? Well, I believe these tools and technologies, I believe these superpowers are only worthwhile if we're going to use them to make this a better world, right? To extend our hands towards one another with compassion and empathy and love. I mean, I get it. Yeah, it sounds tacky, cheesy, but the point is, this is what it's about. To bring people together, to overcome boundaries, to address the grand challenges of humanity and solve them once and for all. Bill Clinton had a Time magazine cover story a couple of years ago called A Case for Optimism, in which he cited a United Nations study, I believe from like 2010, that had determined that the cell phone was the greatest invention in human history to pull people out of poverty. That's what I'm talking about. And in spite of the doom and gloom perpetuated by media enterprises that are just focused on getting our amygdala fired up so that we pay attention, the world is actually now the least violent than it's ever been in all of human history, bar none. Check out the work of Steven Pinker. The Better Angels of Our Nature is the name of his book. His TED Talk, The Myth of Violence, maps out all the numbers. The chances of a human dying at the hands of another human today are the lowest than they've ever been in all of human history. You see the news, you get really scared. It's like everything's going to hell. No, it's not. We've never been in safer, more prosperous times, ever. It's just that we have the capacity to amplify what's wrong, but that's good, because now we can put our effort to address what's wrong and fix it. Now, one thing that's exciting about exponential technologies is that young people increasingly, and hopefully many of you, have this ambition that they can do something that's game-changing and become real wealthy in the process, right? Everybody wants to come up with the next startup, conceive of the next algorithm that will make them billionaires, the next Mark Zuckerberg. And hey, look, that ambition is great. Be ambitious. Think bigger than ever before. But how about reframing the definition of billionaire? And people like Peter Diamandis and numerous others have talked about this at places like Singularity University, and I love the concept. I made a video about it, in fact. And the idea is that in the age of exponential technologies, a billionaire is no longer somebody with $1 billion, although that's nice. A billionaire in the age of exponential technologies, in the age of big data, in the age of transformation, in the age of the Internet of Things, in the age of rapid change and disruption, the new billionaire is somebody who can conceive of a disruption that impacts the lives of 1 billion people in a positive way. That this should be your new metric. That this should be your ambition. That it's actually possible. It is within the realm of your adjacent possible to come up with an idea that can positively touch 1 billion people. What a reason to get up in the morning, guys. You know, something happens to astronauts when they go into orbit. When astronauts go into orbit, many of them report something that's been called by psychologists the overview effect. See, when you actually see the Earth from space, you have a cognitive shift in your self-image. You're no longer identifying just with the person you see in the mirror. You're no longer identifying with your tribe or your race or your nationality. Now you're identifying with the whole thing, right? The whole planet, of which you are a node, a neuron. You are a part of this larger system. Now, all of us don't get to go into orbit, unfortunately, but advances in storytelling technologies like virtual reality, I believe, can become a tool for increasing our empathy and compassion in the world so that we make the necessary shift in our minds that will then govern our actions in the world, that we can use these transformative technologies to become billionaires, to aspire to touch 1 billion souls in a positive way. I believe this is also the solution to the epidemic of stress and angst and depression that we're seeing in the world. We need a bigger purpose. Well, here's the purpose. Here it is. Become a new billionaire. So I made a video about it. I shot it with a smartphone to prove the point that you could use the tool in your pocket to tell a story and spread it and touch 1 billion minds. We got like 2 million views, so that means 2 million minds, not 1 billion yet, but you get the point. Please show the captains of Spaceship Earth.
We live in a world of exponential technological advancement. What this literally means is that we have new construction kits for our reality, new tools with which to probe at the adjacent possible. So consider the implications, right? As Marshall McLuhan used to say, first we build the tools, and then the tools build us. We are designed by what we have designed. There are these feedback loops of mind, tool, and world that radically redefine our boundaries, that radically transform what it means to be human. To be human today is to crisscross the skies. To be human today is to create technosocial wormholes, mind-to-mind communication that overcomes the limits of time, space, and distance. And so what do? Well, we need to radically reach out to one another in ways that we haven't before. There's a great line that says, empathy rarely extends beyond our line of sight. In other words, if it's out of sight, it is out of mind. But if anything, these wireless communication technologies are radically extending our line of sight. They're providing new ontological maps of the real. They're giving us the astronaut overview effect. We are seeing the big picture. We are seeing that we are the captains of Spaceship Earth. And what shall we do? We need to extend our hands to one another. We've never had such tools to overcome all of the limitations of our humanity. We have the power, we have the will, we have the capacity, the creative capacity to overcome our limits. And so today, billions of us linking to one another, creating a global node, a global brain. What is the new definition of billionaire? The new definition of billionaire is he who will positively affect the lives of 1 billion people. He or she who will reach out and say, I will positively affect the lives of 1 billion people. This should be our goal. This is our responsibility. Whew. Here's our chance.
Hopefully that's a message that resonates, guys. And again, I encourage you, these videos are all on my YouTube channel, Shots of Awe. Watch them, share them, show them to your kids, etc. I call these videos Shots of Awe. And the reason is because It all comes down to that particular emotion that I'm trying to instill in you guys today. I know that for me, it's all about awe. Now, what is awe? Well, recent studies at Berkeley and Stanford describe awe as an experience of such perceptual expansion, such perceptual vastness, that you have to reconfigure your mental maps of the world in order to assimilate, to accommodate that new experience, right? Because, we all grow up, we develop these mental maps of the world, right? The been there's and done that's of the adult mind. So there's not a lot of new stuff that gets in. We've seen it all before. We rely on these maps. It's energy efficient. Our brain is at rest. It doesn't have to engage with new information. It's relying on the old maps. It's what keeps us from wanting to be disrupted. But it turns out that cognitive disruption, experiences of astonishment, experiences of awe that immerse us, that arrest us, that crack us open, right? Whether it's the first time you saw the Grand Canyon or the first time you saw images of the Hubble Space Telescope's deep field photograph, right? As it mainlined space and time through the optic nerve. I mean, that is what awe is about. I remember reading an article by Ross Anderson in which he said about the Hubble that through the sheer aesthetic force of its discoveries, the Hubble distills the complex abstractions and complexities of astrophysics into singular expressions of color and light that vindicate Keats' famous couplet, "Beauty is truth, truth is beauty." That is awe. Now, when I think about these technologies, when I think about exponential change, when I think about supercomputers shrinking from building-size machines to devices in our pockets that warp space and time every second for billions of minds to communicate across the planet without friction, that we are living in astonishing times, in awe-inspiring times. And it turns out that when we make that shift in perception, when we awe ourselves, the experience leaves lasting cognitive benefits, increased creativity, increased well-being, a deeper sense of meaning, and when you're awed, it acts as an anti-inflammatory on your organism. So blowing your mind is good for you. It's beneficial. It's medicinal. So I'll leave you with that and the very last video on the transformative power of awe. Please show it. So I think a lot about the contrast between banality and wonder, between disengagement and radiant ecstasy, between being unaffected by the here and now and being absolutely ravished emotionally by it. And I think one of the problems for human beings is mental habits. Once we create a comfort zone, we rarely step outside of that comfort zone. But the consequence of that is a phenomenon known as hedonic adaptation. Overstimulation to the same kind of thing, the same stimuli again and again and again, renders said stimuli invisible. Your brain has already mapped it in its own head, and you no longer literally have to be engaged by that. We have eyes yet see not, ears that hear not, and hearts that neither feel nor understand. There's a great book called The Wondering Brain that says that one of the ways that we elicit wonder is by scrambling the self temporarily so that the world can seep in. Henry Miller says even a blade of grass, when given proper attention, becomes an infinitely magnificent world in itself. Darwin said attention, if sudden and close, graduates into surprise, and this into astonishment, and this into stupefied amazement. That's what rapture is. That's what illumination is. That's what that sort of infinite comprehending awe that human beings love so much. And so how do we do that? How do we mess with our perceptual apparatus in order to have the kind of emotional and aesthetic experience from life that we render most meaningful? Because we all know those moments are there. Those are the moments that would make final cut. Only in these moments we experience afresh the hardly bearable ecstasy of direct energy exploding on our nerve endings. This is the rhapsodic, ecstatic bursting forth of awe that expands our perceptual parameters beyond all previous limits, and we literally have to reconfigure our mental models of the world in order to assimilate
assimilate the beauty of that download. That is what it means to be inspired. The Greek root of the term means to breathe in, to take it in. We fit the universe through our brains and it comes out in the form of nothing less than poetry. We have a responsibility to awe.
So there you go. Here we are at the edge of next. And I hope that I have given you a little something to think about so that you look upon this edge, this precipice, not with fear and apprehension, but with excitement to make this a better, smarter, more intuitive, more amazing world. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you on Facebook and Twitter, et cetera, et cetera. You guys have been beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.